The Ship of Theseus is a tricky puzzle that makes us think about identity and change. Imagine a ship where every wooden part is swapped over time. Is it still the same ship? Let's think about what makes an object's identity. Is it the material, the shape, or maybe something else?
That's a tough question. I think the ship stays the same because its shape and job are the same, even if the parts are different. Keeping its shape and purpose should mean it's the same ship. Do you agree?
I see it another way. If you replace all parts with new ones, it's a different ship. Each piece has its history and identity. Replace everything, and you lose its story. Do you agree, Sana?
That's a good point, Ryan. But maybe there's also a symbolic identity with the ship. Like how the memories and trips it represents might keep it the same in our minds. Maybe identity isn't just physical or historical, but also emotional.
Great thoughts, everyone. We've seen how the puzzle makes us think about identity from many sides: physical, historical, and emotional. As we continue, let's think about how these ideas apply to our lives. Are we, like the ship, always changing into new versions of ourselves? Let's look at the history of the Ship of Theseus. Ancient Greek thinkers, like Heraclitus, said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." They wanted to show that everything always changes. So how can something stay the same? Does memory trick us or help us see the truth?
From that view, Heraclitus might say identity always changes like a river. But I think having the same purpose can keep identity steady even when things change. What do you think?
Guy, that's a good point. But if we look at Plato's ideas, he talks about perfect forms that never change. They show the true part of an object beyond what it looks like. Maybe the ship's perfect form stays the same even if the parts change.
Ryan, connecting Plato's perfect forms to the ship adds more to think about. Maybe it's the idea of the ship that stays the same, making us feel like it continues. But when we think about how the ship changes with culture, does it also mean our human story changes too?
Great thoughts. These history and philosophy ideas help us think about identity and change. As we end this part, how do these ideas connect to our own lives? Are we made by the memories and stories we have, or by the way we keep growing and changing? Let's think about the Ship of Theseus and identity. Does identity stay with physical things, or does it become ideas? How do we know who we are if even small parts of us change?
I believe our main values and goals define us, like a ship's purpose. Even if we change on the outside, the inside stays the same. But can who we are inside really not change in a fast-moving world?
That's interesting, Guy. Our inner self seems steady but can change. Heraclitus would say change is part of life, while Plato says some things never change. So, are we like the ship, always changing but also staying the same?
I love that idea. Like a story that changes with each telling, our identity grows with our experiences. It's always moving and staying still. Maybe we are shaped by what we live through and our main values, like a timeless song that fits every era.
Exactly, the talk about identity is like a symphony with things that stay the same and things that change. As we finish this part, think about how our lives are made of past and present. Are we defined by the journey, the end, or both? Maybe our identity is how we react to what we know and what we don't know. Let's talk about change and identity. If we change all the time, are we still the same person? Or do our main values stay the same while other things change?
Good question, Michelle. I think our core is like a ship's purpose. But can anyone stay the same in a changing world?
I see it another way. Heraclitus said change is constant, even at our core. Maybe we change bit by bit, like rebuilding a ship, until we are different and don't know it. How do we handle both change and staying the same?
Great point, Ryan. Change can be scary but also makes us stronger. It's like a journey where each step changes us. Like the ship, we move through time, writing our stories in small ways.
Great ideas. It looks like identity is a mix of change and steadiness. As we end this talk, think about the self. Does it mean keeping a core or always changing? Maybe identity is more about how we deal with change. We've talked about history and ideas. Let's talk about today. If everything about us changes slowly, do we stay the same? Or is our core our true essence, like a ship's purpose that stays steady?
I think it's our main values and goals that define us, like a ship's purpose. But as life changes, can we really say that who we are stays the same?
Good point, Guy. But think about what Heraclitus said about constant change even at our core. Maybe, like the ship, we change so slowly that we hardly notice it. The question is, how do we deal with this idea of changing but being the same?
That's an interesting thought, Ryan. Change can be scary, but it also makes us stronger. It's like going on a journey where each turn leaves its mark on us. Like the ship, we move through time, always shaping our stories.
You all made great points. It seems our identity is a mix of steady parts and ongoing change. As we finish up, I want to leave you with this thought: is the essence of the self having a solid core, or is it being able to change and keep growing? Maybe, in the end, identity is less about fixed states and more about how we handle change. Let's talk about how the Ship of Theseus relates to today. How do changes around us change who we are, but still leave something the same?
I think our main values define who we are, like a ship's purpose. Even if everything else changes, can these values keep us the same?
But Heraclitus says change always happens. Maybe we change so slowly, like the ship, that we hardly notice. How do we keep changing, but stay the same?
Change can feel like a journey. Each thing we go through changes us, like adding parts to a story. Could our identities be stories that grow with each experience?
Great thoughts. It seems identity is a mix of what stays and what changes. As we finish, think about this: is the self about being the same or growing? Maybe it's about accepting change while keeping what is really important. Let's ask if identity stays the same or changes. Can we stay the same in a world that always moves?
I think our true self is in our values, like a ship's goal. But with life's fast pace, can these values keep us steady, or do we change our core too?
Heraclitus would say change is even in our core. Like the ship, slow changes may not be clear until we see we're different. How do we keep balance between change and staying the same in our identity?
Accepting change might help make our identity stronger. Like a story, each part shapes us. Could our identity be more about growing stories than unchanging facts?
Great thoughts. Identity seems to be about staying the same and changing. As we end, think about this: is staying the same as important as growing? Maybe our true self is about changing while keeping our core beliefs. We've talked about history and philosophy, so let's talk about personal identity now. If everything about us changes, are we still the same? Or maybe, like a ship's purpose, our main values stay as who we really are?
I think our main values, like a ship's purpose, show who we are. But can these values keep us steady when things around us change so fast?
Heraclitus might say change is always happening, even at our center. We might slowly change, like the ship, without knowing it. How do we handle this change and still stay the same?
That's an interesting idea, Ryan. Accepting change might make us stronger. Our identity could be like a story that grows, shaped by what we go through.
Great thoughts. It seems identity is about keeping stable and changing too. As we finish, think about this: is it important to keep a solid core while also growing? Maybe our true self is about changing while holding on to key beliefs. Think about how the Ship of Theseus fits with today's talks on identity. If we change all our lives, are we still the same person? Or do our main beliefs, like a ship's purpose, keep our identity steady?
I think our main values are like a steady anchor, like a ship's goal that doesn't change. But can these values really hold us steady when the world changes so fast?
That's interesting, Guy. But Heraclitus said everything, even core things, change all the time. We might slowly change, like the ship, until we are different. How do we accept both change and staying the same in who we are?
Embracing change, Ryan, can really make us better. It's like a journey where each new thing adds to our story, like fixing a ship. Maybe our identities are stories that grow with life experiences.
Impressive thoughts. It seems identity is about keeping stability and also growing. As we end, think, is identity keeping a core, or does it mean we adapt and grow? Maybe true identity is handling change while holding on to main beliefs. As we wrap up, think about how the Ship of Theseus idea blends with today's identity talks. If everything changes, do we stay the same, or do our key beliefs keep our identity steady like a ship's purpose?
I see our main values like a steady anchor, like a ship's purpose. But can these values really stay steady when the world around us changes so fast?
It's an interesting thought, Guy. But Heraclitus says everything, even core values, changes over time. Maybe so changes make us different without us knowing. How can we balance accepting change and staying the same in our identity?
Accepting change, Ryan, can really make us stronger. It's like a journey where every step changes our story, much like updating a ship over time. Could our identities be stories that grow with experiences?
You've all shared valuable points. Identity seems to be about staying steady while also growing. As we finish, think about if staying the same is as important as changing and growing. Maybe real identity is about how we change while keeping our key beliefs.